Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group for Worksite Solutions. And today we're going to have a little bit of a webinar on webinars because this has been a week of webinars for us. And I think every new webinar we do, we learn something new. When we learn something new, we want to impart it on you guys. So um, when it comes to group long-term care, group benefits, but I think long-term care, especially education, is really at the heart of this thing. If you can't get the employees to understand what they're buying and you can't get them to understand why they are buying it, which I think is the real key, you're not going to have much in the way of participation, or at the very least, if you do have an engaged sort of crowd, you're going to get a lot of questions swarming left and right. So beyond just being something that contributes to participation, it really helps to, I would say, aggregate a lot of the work in answering people's questions and getting them what they need to be able to make a decision, right? And the more we can take that off the plates of HR, for example, broker partners, the better at the end of the day. So we're going to go through a little bit about what do we talk about on these webinars, kind of what's their importance, what are some of the most common questions that we see asked, and go over some of the resources that we use as part of the enrollment that we're going to be making available to you as well. So, um, Mark, anything else to say there? I mean, we kind of back to back to back
hmm
webinars quite a
Yep.
bit, but especially this week.
Yeah, I've always believed in webinars for many, many years, and many of you have been on webinars that I've presented on the past with NGL and others. But I wasn't sure when we brought it to the employer side how much we should do it for every single group. And I would say now I'm more convinced than ever how important it is. I think if you're not comfortable with webinars, it's just important to practice just to get that comfort level. Um, But that education, like you mentioned, is so invaluable. The relationships you build there. You can build videos, you can build things in a box for people, but having them live on, asking their questions, there's no substitute for that, just like there's no substitute for a face-to-face. So I consider it our superpower, which means, in some ways it's easier for us because we do so many. Even these are kind of like webinars, right? But don't be discouraged or uncomfortable with the technology. Don't let that hold you back. You can do your own style because again, your personality is what matters. That's why people are buying this because they trust you. Don't shy away from offering the webinars.
Yeah, this is their opportunity to understand that they can trust you too, for many who haven't met you. And just remember, it's not just your rank and file employees that may show up on these webinars. This could be your executives. It's definitely going to be the HR team. It's going to be a lot of people who it's important to have the trust of and who it's important to have educated on the benefit, because a lot of this communication comes from the top down, right? So the more people hear about this benefit from people they like, know, trust, and look up to, the more likely they are to engage, the more likely they are to engage, more likely they are to participate at the end of the day. So I think it's important because a lot of us on this call are long-term care nerds. And I think one of the really big lessons we learned straight away is uh, it it does matter how much you know, but if you know a lot, you can't skip to step 4 when you start the webinar. You really have to start at step 1. Now, the order in which you lay out this information is kind of up to you and dependent on the flow of the webinar. I'd say everyone flows a little bit differently with the same sort of recipe going in. But you got to remember that if you talk to any given person and just use the term long-term care, they may actually just say, "What's that?" Right? I think even people who have had a personal experience with some sort of extended care or direct family caregiving, they may not even know the term long-term care in itself. So you have to go to the real basics at some point in this webinar and explain what long-term care is and what long-term care insurance really provides you. You know, we take for granted the understanding that long-term care is used to provide benefit dollars to fund professional care, right? So for us, one of the things that really helps to get things started and get people into the perspective of what is long-term care, we talk about really what our mantra is. There are over 50 million unpaid family caregivers in the United States who are putting their lives on hold in some way, shape, or form to take care of a loved one. It's like a tagline, like that. I know that by heart. I use it every time because it helps to get people into the perspective of that's what we're trying to prevent, right? And I often follow that up by saying, if we can reduce that number by even one in the day to day of what we do, that's a good day for us, right? So it's trying to alleviate that sort of really strenuous caregiving sort of relationship out there between family members and make them aware that professional care exists in the first place and that what we're doing is to make them aware of ways they can fund it, including the plan they're being offered. So it sounds really basic, but that's how I like to kick it off because you just do not know the average education level of the audience you're speaking to. Now you might have a good idea. We've given webinars to assisted living communities and their employees. We've given webinars to people in the medical community. We've given webinars to home healthcare professionals. You may not need as much 101 there, but I still think what you can impart from a perspective of how to plan for long-term care, just because they are caregivers in their day-to-day does not mean they are long-term care planning experts. So I think part of what you can really help people to understand there is what perspective should I have when thinking about my own plan, right? So I generally like to start with some basic uh, items there right up front. This is what this is all about. Um, but then I don't like to keep people waiting too long. This is another lesson. I think the bullet points are going to be just like lessons we've learned and how we've tailored to respond to those. So you don't want to keep people waiting too long to tell them about what they're going to get in their long-term care plan, what's being offered to them. Like, what is this plan, right? I can have a few minutes on long-term care 101 and I can go back into it later. But too, um, before everybody gets too glazed over with like, what is long-term care planning, you got to give them something to interact with and you got to give them something that's like personal to them to understand their offering. So I'm going to share one of our demo pages here. And I'm not kidding you. I use these demo pages almost like a cue card, like an outline. Okay. So this is just one for the standard. You can always find these in the marketing section. Just search up demo and you can find demo pages, demo enrollment pages for all of the carriers that we have. So for Chubb, Standard, Transamerica, Trustmark, our core carriers on the group side. So when you have this page up, not only are you highlighting where they're going to go to get everything they need for their enrollment, you're also putting their attention on where they go to enroll. And, Mark and I work well together because we have a good host co-host relationship. Mark can kind of share up the links and answer questions in the chat, which you should encourage people to do, while I'm actually demoing the page. I think encouraging questions is going to make the presentation less boring less anxiety inducing, all of that. It'll also give you a bit of an outline to go off of because if you're sitting there talking to a wall for an hour, which we've both experienced as part of webinars, it can be tough. It can feel like a slog. And you always in the back of your mind want to make sure you're answering employees' questions, but if you don't know what questions they have, how do you know if you're answering them, right? But I use the enrollment page as a cue card to walk through what resources they have available to them and what's special about the plan that I need to tell them about, right? We need to hit the most basic high value things pretty quick in the presentation. So generally what we'll have on the page, since this is just a demo page, I'll scroll to something like this. Most of the enrollment landing pages will have something like this. What's special about the plan? And we'll have a number of bullet points, generally customized for the enrollment for the product, right? But I go through these main points first and foremost. Like, why do you need to be paying attention to this right now? Why are you here? Number one, talking about guaranteed issue underwriting is generally my first stop for a number of reasons, right? Because when we are enrolling, we're dealing with a special enrollment period. We're generally only dealing with maybe a 30-day period at most for most groups where this plan can be accessed guaranteed issue. Super important that they know that. It's also super important that they know that guaranteed issue is not available everywhere in the world of long-term care. It's available especially because they are getting this plan offered to them through their employer. So not only is their employer now a hero for making access to this product with GI underwriting, but they understand that we only have a month here. We got to kind of make a decision and make one quick if we think this is the right thing for us, right? Knowing that if they get long-term care in other avenues, they're probably going to have to go through a couple of pages of medical questions, probably going to have a nurse come out to see them, right? Good old cognitive screen. Can you get up from your chair and walk around your house? I want to see if you're ambulatory. And generally, 30 days plus if I'm being conservative for just processing the underwriting and making a decision. And at the end of that, you could be declined, right? Like that can be a tough experience for some. And GI just takes that all out. It's important they know that's one of the reasons why this is super special. I'll go over a couple of other bullet points that aren't here too. Right now, we're dealing with predominantly life long-term care hybrid plans in the group space. So you want to clear up that confusion before they ever get the chance to express that confusion, right? Because we often are communicating about a long-term care enrollment. And then as soon as we start talking about life insurance, if we don't lay that out kind of out front, people are going to ask, well, what's the deal with this life insurance? I thought this was a long-term care offering, right? Can I buy the long-term care separate from the life insurance? We get all sorts of questions like that, and it's important to just lay out in simple terms what the life insurance does. So I usually frame it as there's a lot of versatility in this plan because it offers both life insurance and long-term care built into the plan, right? So the long-term care is the star of the show, but the death benefit is extremely helpful. The life insurance is extremely helpful. Think of it as your ticket into the long-term care benefits. So that's initially how the long-term care benefits are delivered by using your death benefit early for your long-term care needs. And think of it as a hedge against never needing long-term care because many people will, but not everybody. So if you pass away and don't need any long-term care, you have that death benefit to leave behind to your beneficiaries. But the life insurance also does a number of other things to make this plan as attractive and special as it is, right? Because of the life insurance component of this, we're able to offer guaranteed premiums, right? At the end of the day, with this page that I'm showing here for group whole life for the standard, that means contractually guaranteed benefits and premiums all the way through your age of 121, right? If we're dealing with a term chassis, whether to 100 to 121, 120, there's all sorts of term chassis out there that can make the plan really affordable for a long-term care plan when you stack it up next to others. So there's a ton of benefits that the life insurance provides, but we get into a little bit later why the long-term care is the star of the show. Portability is another really important base to cover because having this plan is all well and good, but if you don't have access to it after your working years, or if you leave the company in 2, 3 years and this plan goes away, there's kind of less incentive to pay attention to it and less value you can infer from it, right? So I always talk about the fact that long-term care can happen at any age, right? Accident, illness, injury. But I also talk about the fact that if we're playing the averages, most of us are going to need long-term care after our working years, right? So the portability is a big deal, knowing that if they leave the employer when they retire, they can take this plan with them, right? Um, and when they port the plan, it's at the same rate that they were paying. So that kind of is another sigh of relief. Oh, that's good, right? That I'm going over with this plan. I'm trying to get that sort of reaction when I'm laying out some of these things. Um, and yeah, I think one of the other things, Mark, that we try to say on every enrollment, kind of in that same vein, is that we really try to preach because of the nature of these products, because you're either going to pass away and leave a death benefit, use the long-term care benefit, or both. Um, Buy what you can comfortably afford and plan to keep in place and use. Because of the nature of the benefit, the people who don't get value out of this plan are people who buy it, pay premiums for years and years, and drop it before they ever use any benefit. Because there will come a time where you will use a component of this plan in some way, shape, or form, right? Anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, we mentioned earlier you can do this in any order you want. We've started with the benefit a lot of the times because a lot of the groups just want to get to the meat of it very quickly, like Jason said. Don't have them waiting with bated breath. So I wouldn't be shy about showing them the calculator, using that to explain how the product works. But it is important to, like Jason was saying, establish the why factor, and you can weave this in at any point. A lot of times, Jason will ask me to start with my personal story, and you should share your personal story. I try to explain the product that is designed to help provide funding for professional care. I think if you start with how the benefits are triggered, I think it gets people just their mind wanders from the conversation. But if you keep them focused on the simplicity of you want funding for professional care in your home, assisted living, nursing home, that helps them understand the why in a very quick soundbite. And, then you can get into how the insurance works to provide that funding. It makes more sense when you start showing the calculator. But that's really where the art to this is making it easy to understand. And then as you get into it, you can get deeper and more into the weeds. But you have to really bake it down to the basic components. And some people are going to drop off, after 15 or 30 minutes. You want them to leave with action items right away. Some people are going to stay for the whole webinar, depending on how long you have that.
Right. I think that's why it's important to talk about the benefit as close to upfront in the presentation as you can. It's important to recognize, I mean, what if you had a busy day of work and, your employer said you got to sit down and attend this webinar for an hour? As I've done it in previous jobs. I had to sit down for an hour webinar, and I knew when I came back, the phone was going to be blinking red, and my email was all going to be highlighted black, unread messages, right? So get to the point, man. Like I may need to leave in the middle of this. I may get called away in the middle of this, right? Somebody may call me at my desk. I'm watching the webinar at my desk. So get them while you have their attention, get to the most important pieces first, and of course you can sprinkle the rest in as you go, right? Um, and important for us is to teach people how to use the benefit calculator, right? And I try to keep this very, very simple, but this also allows us to sneak in the underwriting terms. One of the nice things about this calculator is that it will tell you what level of underwriting you have based on the proposal. So these are generally custom to each group. But you can walk through any example you like. I just try to have them imagine an example case, generally on an affordable default, right? So we can show something that doesn't blow people out of the water. If they want more, they can purchase more, but let's not show them something that's like, oh my God, that breaks the bank. That's not where you want to start. Um, and I just walk them through premium. This gives me an idea of how the benefits work, right? For a $25,000 death benefit, I can access 6% of the death benefit per month for long-term care, right? Giving me my monthly benefit. You may be asking, I'm selecting a 25,000 death benefit. Why does it say 75,000 over here, right? That gives me an opportunity to explain that the extension of benefits rider doubles your amount of coverage for long-term care. And it allows me to explain that the restoration of death benefit rider restores your death benefit 100% when you use it up for long-term care, right? So a lot of what we're doing is weaving in showing resources and using that to educate at the same time. And you kind of got to be efficient as you're going through these presentations because you would be amazed at how quickly an hour passes by, especially when you're stopping to ask questions or you get off on a tangent. It could cost you some serious time. So we try to walk people through the calculator and use that to actually educate on the plan. But also, for example, you can walk through. Here is the guaranteed issue limit for this plan. Here's how much you get, how much you can access without medical underwriting. And of course, it's going to vary enrollment to enrollment, right? The terms themselves, you got to study up on them beforehand. But you'll notice when I hit 175,000, all of a sudden I have health questions, right? So it allows you to kind of explain what the terms are for the enrollment. You can do the same for spouses. You can educate on how much do spouses have guaranteed issue? What's their simplified issue amount, right? So it allows you to put things in perspective quickly and give a tutorial. And when you link to the page, hopefully people will study along with you and open up the calculator, select their age, select a bunch of different benefit amounts, and then you start to get questions as people are using the calculator alongside you, right? I think generating those questions are a super important piece to this. So I haven't been watching the chat, Mark. Do
Oh
we
yeah,
have
yeah. I'll ask you a question. Before you jump off there, though,
oh,
the calculator, I can't emphasize how important that is. It allows us to take what used to be a pretty lengthy amount of time to explain the product and really do it much quicker in a visual way that people engage with, and that they'll go back to later on their own. You're teaching them how to quote it themselves at the same time. So really critical. Now, Steve had asked a question related to this, which is the employee pre-enrollment webinar the same as the initial employer webinar? And then I'll address the second part of his question. And one of the reasons that you might be asking this is we use this same calculator when we actually do our employer presentation, meaning
right.
before the group has decided to move forward, we're trying to show them the value of the product we will be offering to their employees. And this is a very powerful tool for that. We use this as like a demo page to help make that sale so they can visualize what the enrollment's going to look like. And then we use that calculator again during the employee enrollment. But it's a different presentation, right? The employer's needs and what they're looking to do to move it forward are different than what the employees are deciding to do when they're deciding to voluntarily participate in the benefit itself. So really, this you do have to be mindful of who the audience is when you're presenting this. So we're using different language with the employer than the employees. Usually it's a lot simpler. They don't know the language of benefits, but HR is a master of the language of benefits. So you just have to be careful with your acronyms and things like that that employees may not understand. Um, Now, how many pre-enrollment webinars are necessary? That's a good question. And usually we'll actually do this employee webinar like the day the enrollment opens up. So you can do it before the enrollment opens up to pre-educate. We just did one of those today, for example. But probably the normal process for us is let's start off the day the enrollment opens up. So people are getting like a kickoff call, more of a basic webinar, but they can still enroll because that enroll button is live because the enrollment's live. And then we might do a second or even a third webinar towards the end or in the middle and the end of the enrollment period where we're going more into like your FAQs, doing a study hall because people have gotten a chance to really learn about it and they're just wanting to ask those last minute questions on how to enroll. So we do different flavors really depending on the scenario, but that's really where you have to think about what does this group need to help them move them along in that process.
Groups may dictate this too directly to you, like if asked, this is kind of how we like to do webinars. We'll always kind of ask that question if they have, specific wants, but um, we're always ready to make recommendations. And like Mark said, generally two per 30-day period, and we may strap on another if we find there's a lot of like really good engagement. We may do something like an office hours session, solely dictated by your Q&A. You'll have access to me or to Mark or both of us for 30 minutes, and we'll just go through and answer whatever questions are remaining, maybe in the last few days before enrollment ends.
Demetra had asked a question. I know, Demetra, you're newer to the group, so thank you for being here and participating. Is this tool only accessible with a paid membership? And I think you're referring to the Buddy membership. The way we operate is most of the people in this group tend to actually partner with us and have us be their enrollment partner to execute these. So if in that case, of course, you get all access to all of this just as part of the way we split commissions, in terms of those enrollments. But if you do want to do the enrollment yourself and don't want to work with Buddy or have another BJ or IMO you work with, that's why we have the membership. It's a kind of a nominal fee, but we want to get everyone access to these tools as much as possible. And if you ask really nicely, we might just give it to you. So don't worry too much. We're really trying to be here to help grow the market.
Yep. Okay. So I think you're getting a sense for how we do the flow of the education. Just to switch gears, I'm just going to walk you through a sample version of the presentation that we use each and every time. You guys may develop your own. Um, I'll tell you guys, we don't, there are a couple slides in this presentation we don't re even really use anymore. But in the beginning, it really helped us kind of establish a flow, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, slides divided by 1 hour. That'll help you sort of make the most of your time, right? So yada yada, welcome. Here are our names. Here's just a quick kind of summary page. Here's when open enrollment is, right? We're constantly kind of putting these reminders in. Here's where, we got to talk about caregiving, right? And make room for personal stories, things of that nature. Ask the audience if they have any personal stories. You don't necessarily have to make sure somebody shares, but just ask or say, there's probably several of you in the audience who have a story about your own long-term care experience in your family. As a matter of fact, in one of the last webinars we did, somebody actually unmuted and took the time to talk about, their grandmother's journey in dealing with long-term care claims while she was receiving skilled nursing on Medicare. So people will share their story too, and that really helps as well. Um, so this slide, I think this slide is super important. I make sure to stop on this slide every single webinar, because no matter how much you know about long-term care planning, no matter how much experience you have in the industry, think it's important to slow down and just talk about like what does a holistic long-term care plan look like. I think it's important to let the audience know that, hey, we're at the heart of this, obviously insurance professionals, but a good long-term care plan is simply not just about insurance, right? So we use these kind of four pillars to explain to people that a holistic long-term care plan from our perspective has a little of every one of these going on, right? And we talk a little bit about how they all interlink, right? Obviously, I use the family part to talk to people about family caregiving, which we touch on a little bit, and touching on the fact that, yeah, family members may be very willing to take care of you if you needed it. But if we can find ways to give that family member a different role, maybe the in the selection of a professional caregiver, right? Or helping you go out and check out assisted living facilities, dropping you off and picking you up at adult daycare, right? Instead of being the hands-on caregiver, talk about that a little bit. We explain what self-funding is, right? Paying for professional care out of your pocket. Talk about insurance, transfer of risk, premium for benefit dollars, yada, yada. And we talk about the government. But I I try to interweave these a bit and show how they're interrelated, right? Like all of these come together to help you make it work if you need long-term care. On the insurance side, we have a 90-day elimination period, right? We have a deductible period to get through where we're not receiving those benefit dollars. So maybe family members help us through that gap in the coverage until we can get to those benefit dollars and fund professional care. Maybe you use a combination of your family and 1 to 2 hours a day out of your own pocket of professional care to make it work during that time, right? Um, we talk about Medicare and Medicaid and that relationship because that's one of our most common misconceptions we see, right? Medicare is going to cover all my long-term care. Well, in long-term care nerd world, we define long-term care as 90 days or more. Medicare's coverage is limited to 100 days and is limited throughout that 100 days, right? So Medicare is not really going to do it for us in the way that we see it. Medicaid is, and Medicaid requires us to essentially impoverish ourselves to qualify for it. And once we qualify for it, we can only go to Medicaid facilities or in extremely limited cases, um, some sort of home care. But like Medicaid facilities is where you will end up with other Medicaid patients and providers that accept Medicaid assignment at the end of the day. So um, that is an extreme limiting of your options, right? So insurance and self-funding, those private dollars allow you to have options. So it's just talking about how all of these things work together and they start to get an idea of how you cook up a plan. Because if we're going to our cost of care slide, right, and they're seeing numbers that look something like this. Here's what the costs are today. Here's what they're projected to be in 25 years. It could be pretty easy to have a panic attack looking at those numbers, right? That it's not designed to scare people. It's designed to say, why are we doing this? Why are we talking about long-term care planning? Why are we thinking about funding for professional care? It's because it's expensive and it's going to stay expensive. So understanding what pillars we have to help us, understanding that we'll have family, understanding that we'll have out-of-pocket dollars, understanding we're discovering insurance as an option for this, is how we allow those things to work together, to make it work. We will make it work, right? You put an optimistic spin on crazy numbers like that, right? And of course, we summarize the benefit one more time, just make sure we wrap it up with the most relevant details, right? We continue to get the big hitters here. whatever the offer is, we'll kind of summarize that in a few bullet points. Hey, remember the calculator? Go check out the calculator, right? Um, and then we generally, another big honking reminder, here's when this period is ending, right? Your guaranteed issue is only available till this time, right? So you gotta act before this date. And we'll remind them of some of the other services available, link to the landing page. There's a contact number, we include it, and a nice little QR code. And we answer remaining questions with this page up so that people can take out their phone, scan the QR code, go right in, start accessing the calculator. Um, if enrollment is live, maybe they, scan the QR code and take care of it right after we hang up. But it's just allowing people a huge path of least resistance to getting in. And I think that's what I have as far as like the programming. Like, what are we normally doing? You see, even with no employee questions, right? We answered a few questions from people as we went. It's 38 minutes, right? So you got to be really diligent with your time. Like I summarized things that I normally walk through in pretty good detail. And we've gotten good enough that we are normally finishing up at like 56, 57 minutes, if we're having a really good, smooth session. But if you've got an interested audience and they're staying past the top of the hour, that's something to be thankful for, but you got to leave time for answering the questions because um, otherwise you're just going to have to answer them later. They're going to come to HR and HR is going to ask them of you, right? That's one of the most important things outside of making sure the people who are going to be in a position to buy this are educated. I can get everybody in one room and answer everybody's questions so I don't have to have them clog up my inbox. Good enough for me. Anything that I missed, Mark?
Actually, yeah, Steve had a great question. I want to bring it up for the rest of the group. He had asked, is this presentation that you shared today in the portal in the buddy system? And the answer is yes. We want to look for employee benefit presentation under sales tools. And the version that Jason showed is in Prezi. The one that you'll get in the portal is the same template, but in PowerPoint to make it easier for you to edit if you don't have Prezi. There's also an employer presentation, Steve, to your question earlier, that's also in the buddy system. So you're going to use that when you present to sell the HR, the employer to move forward, and this presentation you'd use during the webinars for the employees.
Awesome. Anybody have any questions, any thoughts? Gretchen, are you with us? Are you of this astral plane?
Yes.
Hi. Uh, oh,
Oh, we have a question.
yeah. Yeah, Temetra, go ahead.
Demetra.
Happy to answer your question.
First of all, Jason, thank you. I was kind of surprised when this popped up in my email, and I'm glad I had the time to make it here. It's great to connect with you. Mark, I got your communication about connecting you with he has a specific title, Chief of Business something or other, but he reaches out to other companies and creates business opportunities. So I'm going to connect the two of you in an email. I don't think there was really a question. It's just that I wanted to acknowledge you. This was a great presentation, and I can't wait to get my hands on that tool and also to be able to do it through RIMO. So thank you.
So
Awesome. Well, we
Awesome.
appreciate you being here. So, Gretchen, you kind of handle obviously Mark and I get on stage and run our mouths for an hour, but you do a lot of the ramp up, the lead up to the webinar as far as communications and what the heck platform is this going to be on? Is it going to be on Teams or Zoom or Google Meet, whatever it may be? What do you think is important to making sure that people actually show up to our webinars, which they do?
Yeah, I think well, it depends on the organization, but if you're talking about employers, this goes back to when you're initially doing like your kickoff call and you're planning, you want to make sure to understand what their channels are and where you can plug into the what information you can plug into those channels. And one of the things is the webinar invitation. Usually, the employer will want to send that out themselves. Sometimes we do a registration process where we're setting up the registration through Zoom. Sometimes they do it on their own. Some use Meet, some use um, Teams. So there's different platforms. So you just kind of have to roll with it. Sometimes you or if we're doing the enrollment, if we're helping with the enrollment, we'll, like I said, we'll set up the registration. Then we have other employers who they'll just send out the invite and everybody it gets on everybody's calendar. And that's kind of the best world to work in
Yep.
because they all know if HR is inviting me to this, I need to go. So that's usually when we get the best attendance. Um, Associations are a little harder not to crack as far as getting people to the webinar. But on the employer side, um, it tends to be much easier. But the other thing I wanted to address, if I may, Jason,
Of
is
course.
part of your kickoff call, and you may have done this in the whole sales process, is really getting an understanding of the audience because that will help if Mark and Jason are doing the webinar or if you're doing the webinar it will help you understand what that flow that Jason just walked through, what that flow needs to focus on. So if I mean we've done webinars to techie people and they're very curious and they dissect everything and analyze everything. That's a much different conversation than having a conversation with a group of like social workers, which we've also done. So, you just want to sort of tune in to your audience like any marketing or sales process, know your audience, and then sort of that will guide you in what that flow needs to be for your web.
100%. Yeah, and I think at its most basic, like, does your employee community attend webinars?
Mhm.
Like if we're if we're doing an enrollment for air traffic controllers, like they're going to be out landing planes. They're not going to likely attend webinars or something that is like I'm out in the field doing construction, right? Maybe the executive team. I mean, it may still be worth putting on a webinar, but like how do we
Oh,
reach those other people in the field too?
oh yeah. Well, and that's a great point, Jason, because the other thing is we'll record the webinar and like we do with these, and we'll add it to the landing page. So people who maybe didn't get a chance to be on live, they can go to the landing page and they can view the webinar at their leisure. But then the other piece that we'll do is we may do like another full follow-up webinar at a different time or do what we call office hours, where people they can view the webinar recorded and they can come with their questions. So it's not like it's a second webinar, but it's not a full presentation of the benefit. It's more, we're here to answer your questions to guide you through the enrollment process.
Yeah, that's a good point on just like what office hours is maybe designed to do. Like I think it really helps get that person who's gone once go twice, especially as it's like end of the enrollment. We're kind of communicating it as you likely have more questions or it's your last few days of decision making. And I think if somebody attends two webinars, they're like seriously,
Mhm.
seriously interested and they are trying to figure stuff out. And um, going to the same webinar twice will probably not capitalize on their interest in the same way as maybe adding that extra webinar um, where it can just be guided by their questions and it can be a little bit less buttoned up, right? Um, so I think that's a great characterization of what it's designed to do. And sometimes that's just like an audible is called, and we decide to throw it on the calendar.
Mhm. Yeah.
And the more you kind of understand the data as the enrollment's going, you will start to get signals of when that may make sense. The group obviously may say, hey, maybe we do one more thing or we recommend it. And they say, yeah, that's a great idea. But you can also maybe get some back end metrics from the enrollment platform and see that there are a lot of people in progress that still need to finish. All right,
Mhm.
well, let's reach our hand out and offer an opportunity to get any questions answered. Are you stuck on anything in the platform, right? I mean, if you can throw up a 30-minute webinar and get like two people unstuck in the enrollment platform who are just like sitting there, waiting to submit, not as if they ran into a technical issue, but they had a couple questions that they wanted answered or they wanted to understand how to answer a question, right? You can get two people unstuck, get yourself, you know, two new applications for spending 30 minutes on an office hours webinar. I mean, wouldn't you?
Mhm.
So yeah, it's just really helpful. Um, Enrollment results by size. Mark, get a mark, our data nerd.
So, as you know, any group that has less than 500 employees, you really want to have an employer-funded component, and that really drives your participation on the voluntary side too. So, good rule of thumb is without any employer funding, I would say 5 to 10% is what to expect. Obviously, you have a really good engagement. You have a group that's a good candidate for the product. The product's really strong. You can do better than that. But with employer funding, triple that number on the voluntary side. So maybe you'll get, 15 to 30% if you get an employer funded base plan or an executive carve out. So it really depends on whether you've sold that employer funding, and that's why we always emphasize that um, in terms of participation rates. Larger groups generally are going to have lower percentage participation, but higher numbers. Um, for webinars, and I'll kind of answer that question, it's funny how our results have varied when the employer is really supporting it, like Gretchen was saying, and sending out the link and everyone's automatically on their calendar, sometimes like 80% of all the employees show up live. It's crazy how good the
Wow.
engagement is. They dedicate an hour during the workday. Our last webinar, Jason, I had was like, it brought tears to our eyes because as people left the webinar, every single person unmuted and thanked us one at a time.
Yeah, it was like a
Never,
110
never had
person
that happen.
group and 60 showed up and every single one made sure to say thank you. This was great before they signed off. Yeah, and that's just for us, that was a second enrollment. So that kind of also helps you to understand how webinars are a relationship builder and how the group business relationship building works. Don't think of this short term as one enrollment, I'll squeeze as much participation and premium as I can get out of it, and we're done. I mean, this is an opportunity to do this year in, year out, not just for open enrollment for new hires too. Sometimes a carrier can grant you a full guaranteed issue re-enrollment depending on the group. That's the situation we found ourselves in. It was a group that was, we that was one of our like very first, I would say, like very first with all of our team
Mhm.
all in on group long-term
Yeah.
care. And we hit some potholes the size of the state of Texas as we were going through this thing. It was a bumpy ride. It was an adventure, but we built that relationship and they stayed with us. And, now we're doing their second enrollment and the participation on the webinar was just, unreal. It's just, a marker of how far we've come on that.
Um, the other thing that I want to kind of go back to the data piece of it because that's important too. When we're involved in the enrollment, I make it a point of watching the numbers. So we're watching how many people are going to the landing page. I can tell if we're not sending out the emails in most employer situations, they want to do it themselves. I can tell when they send out an email because there are spikes on the landing page, but also if we can get the list and upload it into our system, not to email or reach out, but just to see when somebody lands on the page, we can see it. We can also determine if they were on a webinar. So you can sort of narrow your list down, and then the specialists can reach out to those people who are really you know they're really thinking about this. They've been to the webinar, they've been on the landing page. So all of that sort of drives engagement and definitely drives results.
Takes a village
It
for sure,
does. Yep.
right? Like if you can't play nice with others, group enrollments just might not be your thing. But if you're good at it, you might be really good at it.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's it. You guys have anything else to add or ask? I think that covers like webinars.
One thing I wanted to mention, not totally off topic, but a little off topic, is I put a couple of links in the chat. The first link is a new group health broker, a Facebook group. Great questions, a lot of similar things. Do you do webinars for every group? How do you do enrollments? So if you're newer to the group space, that's a great way to learn. But even seasoned veterans of it, I think you're going to pick up a lot of information. So it's smaller right now, but a lot of participation, great people that started it. So I definitely endorse that. And I also put the link to our long-term care insurance specialist Facebook group as well. Of course, you can answer questions anytime and we'll jump in as well. 1,500 of your closest long-term care friends. So I just
Literally.
want to mention that, especially for the newer folks that are in this study group today.
Yep. And yeah, I think from a webinar standpoint, I love all the groups who do webinars for. I just got to give a shout out to the small groups because the webinars for small groups are so fun. They're like so intimate and personal. It's like really just having a conversation and oh, I got to go through these slides. I'm gonna like teach a small group of people who all really know and like each other. So if you haven't been like looking around for small groups, and you maybe find yourself fishing in the mid to large waters, don't forget those small groups, man. They are special and memorable all the same and could end up being some of your best cases. So, all right. I think that'll do it for us. Thank you all for being here and asking your questions and sitting as we gave our, I don't know how manyth webinar on webinars. Interesting little meta presentation, but thank you all. We appreciate you. Be well. And we'll see you this time next week. We'll be back from Metacarians for
Yep.
next one.
Yep.
See
Thank
ya.
you.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.